So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. When learning is purposeful, creativity blossoms. When creativity blossoms, thinking emanates. When thinking emanates, knowledge is fully lit. And when knowledge is fully lit, economies flourish. And it's with that quote from Dr. Abdul Kalam that I'd like to welcome you to this We Are Africa discussion on recovery and resilience, a digital future for the creative industry. For those of you who haven't interacted with Art4Dev in the past, Art4Dev is an expected long-term partnership between Youth Transforming Africa as well as the World Bank Group Art Program. Youth Transforming Africa is a community built on the Blog4Dev network, gathering all the winners of the annual competition organized by the World Bank in Africa. My name is Dimpho Lekgeu. I'm the 2020 Blog4Dev winner in South Africa, and I'll also be today's moderator. The purpose of today's conversation is to explore the possibilities for economic recovery and resilience in the African creative sector and beyond post-COVID-19. I'd like to remind everyone to please make sure that your microphones are turned off throughout the meeting. Please feel free to connect with us and drop any questions and comments that you may have in the question box for the Q&A session later. We have an incredible lineup of speakers who are going to aid today's conversation. We're joined by Marina Clavani, who's an art curator and senior program manager at the World Bank Art Program. We're joined by Naomi Halewood, who's a senior digital development specialist at the World Bank. We're also joined by multidisciplinary artists and fashion designers, Ravneesh Hans from Tanzania and Sandile Mhlongo from South Africa. And finally, we're joined by Antoine Lema, who's a senior social development specialist. To start, I'm going to ask that Marina gives us an overview of the We Are Africa initiative.
Thank you, Dimpho, and welcome everybody as well. This is the sixth of our artist talks as part of the virtual exhibition We Are Africa, the Power of Women and Youth, which is an experimental exhibition in which we are featuring artists, multidisciplinary artists, throughout the continent to address different topics that are relevant for the future of this wonderful part of the world. So today we are addressing the question of what digital economy and what digital art can do to help the road of recovery of Africa. What is very interesting is a few weeks ago, the World Bank Group and the International Monetary Fund held their annual meetings, virtually, naturally, and one of the main topics was digital economy, and specifically the challenges of virtual digital economy. So we think in our program that artists are really the, if you want, the magicians of the future. They are the people who have a very clear view of what the reality is. In the same time, they can imagine something that nobody else can imagine. So it's our pleasure to invite you to listen to the dialogue between World Bank experts and two wonderful artists who will try to enlighten what the reality and what the future may look like. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marina. As mentioned in my introduction, COVID-19 has kind of forced all of us, right, to reimagine what a future looks like digitally and what connecting online looks like. And so I'm going to invite Naomi Halewood to give us an overview of the Digital Economy Initiative for Africa.
Thank you very much. So the digital space and the internet has developed significantly over especially over the past decade on the African continent, especially with the access of mobile phones. However, we still see that broadband penetration on the continent is still at 29% of the population. And so there's a lot more work to do in terms of increasing access to the internet and digital technologies. The pandemic has also increased the role, increased the importance and role of digital communications and infrastructure, especially for the continuity of economic activities, as well as social activities, in particular, continuing of education through online means. And so the World Bank Group, since the 80s, has been supporting governments all over the world in developing the telecommunications sector and deploying infrastructure in this sector. The focus has very much been the past 2 decades in Africa on increasing connectivity within the region. And in this regard, the World Bank Group has supported countries to deploy broadband networks. In the first mile, what we call the first mile, which is a submarine fiber optic cable infrastructure that connects the country to the global internet network. The middle mile, which focuses on domestic in-country networks. The last mile, which provides actual access to individuals and businesses. And we also have an area called the invisible mile, which is support to the policy and regulatory framework for the oversight of the telecommunications sector, which the objectives include a competitive, vibrant telecommunications or broadband sector that is continuously evolving and improving in terms of affordability of services, quality, and innovation. Another key piece of infrastructure that is increasing in importance is data centers and internet exchange points. This infrastructure is extremely important in order to manage the increase in data flows within the country and within the region. Next slide, please. So in the past several years, the digital development agenda has broadened. It has extended from simply infrastructure to embracing an ecosystem approach in order to go beyond incremental success to ensure impact on scale, as well as dealing with the risks of exclusion. As the sector develops, there are communities that continue to fall behind. And so the ecosystem approach tries to make the development and the benefits of digital development more inclusive. And the other key important aspect, which is relevant to our discussion today, is the ecosystem approach promotes homegrown local content, digital content that is relevant to the people it is serving on the African continent. And so the elements of the new ecosystem approach includes multiple pillars. And in this regard, the World Bank Group launched the Digital Economy for Africa initiative in 2018, which is to support governments transition to a digitally enabled society by 2030, as well as the initiative also supports the African Union's digital transformational strategy for Africa. And the key pillars include digital infrastructure, digital financial services platforms, digital business platforms, digital public platforms, which used to be called e-government. And one element one new element that is extremely important, that really is catalytic for all of this to work, is digital skills. Next slide, please. And alongside the support for these building blocks for the digital economy, we also provide support in mitigating risks associated with digital technologies. And as I'm sure you've heard much of these topics in the news recently, data protection, communications privacy, cybersecurity, and safety of online content. So these are, as we support governments develop the digital sector, we also provide support in mitigating these risks. Next slide, please. So we have started this more comprehensive approach to digital development in a number of countries in Africa, and we continue to expand our work and our support. Again, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to participate in today's discussion. It is when creative things happen in the digital space when we really start seeing the benefits of digital development. And I'm excited to hear about what is happening in this space today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Naomi, for highlighting, I think, the importance of digital skills, of digital infrastructure, but also, I think, bringing our attention to the importance of protecting online communities and protecting people from the ongoing threats that digitization comes with. I'm excited now to invite our first artist to give us his presentation. His name is Sandile Mhlongo, and as you can see on the screen, he's a multidisciplinary artist and art director from South Africa. Sandile is a self-taught art director who draws his inspiration from several disciplines, including fashion, carpentry, as well as gaming. Sandile, the floor is yours.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I hope everybody is well. Over the past 6 months, COVID has shown us that adversity does not discriminate. A lot of us have experienced loss, stress, and doubt, and the only thing that we could do was dress up to lift our energies and make ourselves feel better. We dressed up with nowhere to go for video calls and to buy groceries. Next slide, please. We are the Unicorns, which is short for the Unique Icons, a slow fashion streetwear brand from South Africa. And we use clothing and online content to facilitate positive self-talk, healing, imagination, build resilience, and bring individuals together. We use fashion as a means to democratize our art and mobilize our philosophy to life. Next slide, please. This is our logo that was created on Microsoft Word in our senior year of high school, and it is made up of a variety of Greek symbols that were at first an aesthetic choice, but after some time over doing research, we learned what each symbol meant. And this is essentially the energy that you tap into when you wear our clothes. And we believe that these are the characteristics of a unique icon. Next slide, please. Some individuals may see clothing as superficial, but between 2012 and now, we have discovered that clothes can work wonders for individuals managing stress, difficulties, anxiety, and doubt. We are certain that there are clothes that are in your closet right now that when you wear, it makes you feel invincible. Now imagine if your clothes spoke back to you and they reminded you that no matter what you do or that crazy idea that's in your mind right now, that someone trusts in you to execute it, and always serves as a reminder that you should believe in what you cannot see. Next slide, please. In the dictionary, culture is defined as the characteristics and knowledge of a particular group involving art, social habits, and language. And at the Unicorns, we use the internet and social media to build a community of unicorns from all over the world. This, along with our clothes, carries out the message of self-affirmation, social support, and collaboration. And when you wear our clothes, when people read it, it brings a smile across someone's face and gives them hope for better days. We have been fortunate enough through the internet and social media to draw individuals from all over the world, from places such as Amsterdam, the UK, China, various parts of Africa, and individuals from different walks of life are able to wear our clothes and tap into this energy of self-affirmation and use our clothes as a reminder to trust in themselves. And over this COVID period, the one thing that we've been fortunate with, because we haven't been able to sort of like do, been able to do physical sales, we've been fortunate enough to sort of like find alternatives to selling our clothing. We use platforms such as Instagram and WhatsApp stores to retail our clothing, and that has worked for us in a sense that through those platforms, unlike an online store, we're able to not only give a tailored customer experience, but also build an interpersonal relationship with the people that we communicate with. Next slide, please. Over time, we've realized that alone, this is as far as I can reach, and it's literally from the one tip of your hands to the other. But if we come together and everyone in this group joins me and also spreads their hand, eventually we could essentially go from one side of the room and reach the other side of the room. And that's what's inspired our philosophy to engage with our community, to play with us and create with us in order for us to win together. And with this philosophy, we essentially come together to help each other create work that helps us build experience in our portfolios and attract new clients, which essentially leads to financial gain to not only us as a brand, but to the people that are involved in the project. As we all know that for you to get any work, you need work experience. And fortunately enough, social media has made it so easy that if you create your work and you put it on an online platform, from my personal experience in the boardrooms that you go to, they don't ask for a website anymore. If your name comes up, people essentially want your Instagram handle, and that's where they essentially source for work now. And that essentially benefits our community in a holistic sense. Next slide, please. This is our formula to what we believe creates resilience. It's a combination of self-affirmation and social support. We would like to challenge you for the next 30 days, when you wake up in the morning, to please look at yourself in the mirror and repeat 3 times, in you we trust, and to also start recognizing a community of like-minded individuals around you and work together to practice your craft and share it on the internet and see what happens. Next slide, please. The images on this slide is a series of how we take our philosophy and adapt it to various art installations. Starting from your far left, it is a installation called Object 143, and 143 stands for I love you. And essentially, we challenge the audience to essentially interact with our installation by first finding a thought that's within the jacket, which is essentially within them, and putting on the jacket. And the jacket is made in such a way that when you put it on, it feels like a hug. And then you move towards the mirror, and where the gold stuff is, there's a bowl there. and that's where the magic is. And for some interesting reason, every single individual has an individualistic experience. And when you reach into this bowl, you essentially find an affirmation that you are challenged to repeat to yourself 3 times in the mirror for 30 days. And that is a therapy approach that is called mirror work. And essentially, by you affirming yourself to yourself in the mirror for a period of 30 days, your mind tends to believe it, and it helps you build resilience over time. And the other 2 installations on the right-hand side, those are a labyrinth that have the same concept as the first one. And essentially with a labyrinth, the walk you take is a walk within yourself to find an answer in the middle of the labyrinth, and then you essentially walk out of the labyrinth to the world that exists outside. Next slide, please. Okay, Rama. All right. The clip that is about to follow is a snippet from our virtual fashion show that we made in collaboration with members of our community locally and all over the world at an Airbnb and over a series of WhatsApp conversation. This fashion show was an ode to everyone that was losing hope in the time of Corona, and essentially is a reminder that we all need to believe in what lies beyond our veil of perception. And what we really appreciated most about the virtual show is that it's been able to democratize the elitist fashion show experience to everyone all over the world, and they could watch it anywhere at any time and have a front row seat. And as you watch the fashion show, you essentially see that there is something special about it. And what we did was essentially do that so that everyone can see themselves in the clothing. And when you listen to the messages that you are given, you are able to have hope. We hope that you enjoy it, and we hope that this snippet of the fashion show will essentially kind of give you hope and give you answers in times of uncertainty. In you we trust, the unicorn. Thank you.
For me, believing in what you can't see is the essence of faith. It's basically just choosing to use your imagination and trust that whatever your vision is, whatever you visualize will come to life and will come to fruition. So, yeah, that is what believing in what you can't see means to me.
Believing what you can't see mirrors this idea of a hope for a better future. We dream of realistic and attainable goals, and with every day we hope we are getting closer.
What you can see is another man's perspective. What you can't see is your perspective. Believe in yourself. Believe in what you can't see.
I guess that's just it, right? Believing in what you can't see. Even if there's just an imagination or that thought or that idea, it's something, right? It's something that has the potential to be so much more. That's the beautiful thing about it.
What you can't see. What that means to me is walking by faith and not by sight, believing in a higher power, a higher purpose, believing in your intuition, and believing in yourself and trusting in yourself. That's what believing in what you can't see means to me.
So for me, believing in what you don't see. It's believing in the magic of the world that hasn't manifested. It's trusting the world inside you and the potential to influence the physical realm. And to believe in that is to basically believe in yourself.
Believe in what you can't see. For me, on my journey currently, that means putting in the work and believing that it will get you the results you want. Sometimes it's hard to put in the effort because we can't see the end game. So believe in what you can't see.
Believe in yourself and believe in what you can't see. Thank you so much, Sandile, for that incredible presentation. I think it's so interesting to me how you made the connection between our psychological well-being and the clothes that we wear. I'm not sure if I'm the only one, but I had certainly never made connected those dots before, and especially during a time like COVID-19, where we had, very little means to feel good about ourselves or about our situation. I can attest to the fact that now I understand the relationship between clothes and mood, because I saw those colorful images of Shoma Josie and all those people in the presentation wearing your brand, and I think I can firmly say that I feel slightly better. So thank you very much. We're obviously going to hear more from you later on during the Q&A session, which is also a reminder to everyone who is participating today. Please do send us your questions and comments and engage with us in the chat box. I'm now going to hand over to Ravneesh Hans from Tanzania.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ravneesh Hans, and I am the founder and principal designer of Zivansh, which is a design studio located in Zanzibar, Tanzania. Being born and brought up in Arusha, Tanzania, and having studied graphic design, I always had a passion for my country, art, and culture. I founded Zivansh on my journey to self-discovery. I knew I always wanted to create a more contemporary design pedagogy for Tanzania, and as well wanted to empower women at the same time. The next slide, please. As you can see, my cushions here all represent women. I draw my inspiration from the Maasai tribe in Tanzania. The finishing work, which is, if you can go to the next slide, please, which shows you the embroidery and the mirror work. This represents my Indian side. Zanzibar and India are also known for their beautiful architecture, which you can see the piece on the right is where I've drawn my inspiration from. Next slide, please. I think of Zivansh as more of a design studio rather than a store. Over here, we do a lot of collaborations. And in this piece, as you can see, I've collaborated with a Zanzibari artist who depicted the streets of Stone Town on this shirt. Next slide, please. I also spend my time finding materials, guiding our tailors, weavers, artists, and artisans into making products that represent us as avant-garde. Currently, Zivansh supports over 300 women, both artisans directly and through collaborations. Next slide, please. We work with local carpenters to make these amazing light fixtures. Next slide, please. We also collaborate with metal artists based in Dar es Salaam that are disabled. Next slide, please. This year has been hard. Zanzibar relies heavily on tourism. So with the lack of tourists, it has had a serious financial impact on businesses in Zanzibar. When the pandemic started, there was a big scare on infection. Zivansh made an upwards of 8,000 masks at first to distribute amongst the community. and most recently to help prepare businesses in Zanzibar to reopen safely. This really played a big part in supporting jobs for our local tailors during this pandemic. Today, Zanzibar is believed to be COVID-free, but the economic impact is vast and it will take years to recover from. Online digital social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube have played a big role to engage and bring the community together for events and as well raise awareness for different projects for the community. Online businesses has been a big push in the creative industry. We saw a lot of small businesses turn towards the digital platform this year, selling online and marketing online. We're also seeing more collaborations between local businesses than ever before in the history of the country. We have been engaging more with local communities, taking part in local farmer markets and artisan markets, and now busy prepping for the upcoming Christmas markets. Next slide, please. Our store will be going online in a few weeks, and we just resumed business earlier this month. I think going digitally now, there's more than ever ways to connect and collaborate and reach a wider audience. And I'm actually very excited because out of this lockdown pandemic, I think we've really become more creative and progressive than ever before. And I can't wait to see the innovative and creative stuff that comes out of this and how we're going to use the digital platform to represent this. I'm super excited. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ravneesh, and I certainly look forward to hearing more about the work that you're doing in Tanzania during the Q&A session. But before we get into that, I'm going to hand over to Antoine Lema to give us a run through best practices, oral, traditional, and how to assist community during times of transformation.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
I'm going to talk a little bit about, the digital opportunity, how the World Bank has used it in one example. There are many, but I'm going to choose Djibouti. And then I'll talk a little bit about the socioeconomic and environmental impact of the digital economy. Djibouti is a small country in East Africa, as most of you know. It has less than 1 million inhabitants. It's actually about 960,000. And the population of the country is composed of two ethnic groups, the Issa and the Afar. Most Afars come from Ethiopia and most Issa come from Somalia. The bank prepared, together with the country, a community-driven development project for $15 million, targeting the poorest of the poor in the country. And so out of those 960,000 people, you have around 50,000 that the bank has helped to register in a social registry for Djibouti, and they will receive in the next 3 years $56 a month as cash payment. To many, that may not be a lot, but in Djibouti, that's a lot for poor people. And the target is under 1,000 households by the end of the project. And the project has just started now. So within 3 years, Djibouti and the World Bank hope to reach to about 100,000 of the poorest. And this has been possible, first of all, because through surveys, the government has been able to document who are the poorest in each region, and then have a database digitalized, so you know exactly in which region, in which village, and have not gone down to household level, but at least village level and town level. So they know exactly where the people are. And how the compensation will be paid will depend a little bit on third parties, because the government won't do it alone. They'll use third parties to do that. But for the countryside, phones are the instruments that will be used so that people can transfer their funds through their phones, which makes it much more easier. You don't have to use banks and so forth, which are not everywhere. I mean, all this sounds good and nice, but the first question you ask is, what happens after 3 years when this project is over? But the whole idea is that 3 years from now, the government will take over. So the payment will be done through government budget. And the other question that may arise, like, so for how long can the government suspend? One of the mechanisms that is in the system is that when a person who has been receiving the cash gets a job, he or she will be removed from the system and can only come back once he or she becomes unemployed, and through a new system of appraising what has happened and whether the person is eligible again, then they would join the program again. Now, digital economy in general is good because it improves communication. And we know very well that when people don't talk to each other anymore, it means bad thing. Because through communication, we can actually deal with our differences as long as we talk to each other. When we don't talk anymore, then we have trouble. So because of the communication part, that is really, really positive, whether on personal level or on business level. Now, when you look at it, what are the, let's say, the weak sides of the economy? One of them is actually it shows you the urban and rural divide. Digital economies works very well in urban areas, connecting urban areas. But those who are left behind in the rural areas get really, really left behind because they don't have access to those new markets, schools, technologies, and the phone is maybe the closest thing they can use. So it shows the divide between urban and rural, and not only in Africa, even in the US, where I'm based, working for the World Bank. For instance, Native Americans, a lot of Native American communities in the US don't have internet connections, and their schools don't have connections. So it really shows the difference between being poor you don't have access, being a little bit better off, not rich, but at least wealthier than the poor, you have access. And in the long term, we have to work on how to improve access to the rural areas. And the other part is when access improves, then consumption of energy goes up. Because one of the main challenge that the digital economy has around the world is that in when you have a situation, you need to progress in energy efficiency, as a result, consumption will increase. So the more people are using the digital economy, energy consumption will increase because of the storage, because of the production of these technologies. So how do we deal with that? Research is being carried out, but it has a toll on the environment. So while promoting a digital economy, we must be aware of what are the social and environmental impacts on this economy. That's where I would like to end my, let's say, input into this discussion, that digital economy has very positive impacts, but also have some side effects on the environment and on the social divide. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Antoine, and bringing us to the realization again that although digitization is progressive, we do need to keep in mind the social, economic, and even environmental effects that it has on society. It's time now for us to get into our Q&A session with our artists, Sandile Mhlongo, as well as Ravneesh Hans. We're talking about resilient recovery for digital economies post-COVID-19. But before we can talk about recovery, we need to understand the ways in which the creative industry has been impacted by the pandemic. So I'm going to start with Ravneesh and ask, how has the pandemic affected your work and how have you managed to adapt?
What happened was when the pandemic started, we turned more towards social media. First of all, it started with tourism shutdown. Zanzibar relies heavily on tourism. So when that happened, that's how it affected Zanzibar. And our store relies heavily on tourism. But then what started happening was the internal tourism started happening more. So we started targeting local markets more. We started going online more. Yeah, I think that's how.
Yeah, and Sandile, I think you mentioned during your presentation that you kind of you couldn't do any more physical sales, right? So you had to make use of platforms like WhatsApp to take in orders, right? So how can you elaborate on that? What are some of the ways that, your business was affected by the pandemic and how have you managed to adapt?
So essentially, we relied heavily on, like, as a clothing brand, we rely heavily on people actually trying out your clothes, because that's what essentially is like the final sell of any item. And with that not being able to be done, people had to literally believe in what they couldn't see with the clothes that we make, and that like essentially allowed us to focus our attention more onto social media and our online platforms. And the strategy that we had used was, for Instagram is for people to see it, and then if they're interested in it, they click on the link in bio, and that would take them straight to WhatsApp. And through WhatsApp, would essentially sort of like have a conversation with them, and through the series of those conversations, that has opened us to be a more sustainable brand, because we're able to essentially like tailor each and every item to each of the customers that we have. And that has, to a certain extent, like altered our model of selling, because now we make to order. And essentially what we've realized over time is that like a large may not be as universal as a large may be. And sometimes your body is large, but your arms are longer. And that has kind of sort of like helped us adapt to essentially like tailor each of the garments to each of the clients that we have. And it's also pushed us to essentially have like a delivery service where I'd wear a full-on tracksuit and a face mask. And that was essentially part of like the retail process that we kind of engaged in. And like even with our packaging, we had to alter that and essentially sort of like have a sticker that essentially kind of sort of like tells you more about the garment and also tells you the effects that the garment would give you. So to a certain extent, COVID has actually allowed us to individually tailor for each and every customer, and it has also brought overheads down by we don't have to sell rent. We don't have to pay for any rent, and essentially everything is done from our bedroom at home, essentially, which is kind of good for business to a certain extent because there's less overheads and it increases profits, and it ensures repeat customers because everything is tailored to each individual.
I can attest to that, that the final sell of an item is when you put it on. I have let go of several items in store during the COVID-19 pandemic because they wouldn't let me into the fitting rooms. But we have a question to Sandile from Elena Grant in the chat box, and she asks, who are the people wearing your designs? Are the clothes affordable to young people? Are they widely available?
Yes, they are. We pride ourselves in making quality at affordable prices. And the one thing that we have realized, especially with streetwear, is that like a lot of brands tend to have the misconception that brand value is created by the price that you sell your item at. And we essentially use like local tailors and we print our fabrics locally, and that essentially like allows us to make our clothing more affordable. And we have this thing where it's more affordable to buy a set than it is to buy individually, and that sort of like has a series of discounts. And we also encourage our customers to collaborate and buy together to sort of like get a discount if they buy 2 items as opposed to buying 1. And in that process, more people meet each other.
And I think, Sandile, you've spoken to how you've used online platforms, right, to kind of adapt to COVID-19, the use of social media as well as WhatsApp. I'd like to hear from Ravneesh how digital platforms and online communities have supported your work through the COVID-19 pandemic.
So during the pandemic, a lot of Facebook groups were made for the Zanzibar communities to come together to hold artisan events or support communities that had to set up different art projects or help artists who are in need for their galleries, and as well as Instagram to raise awareness for these artists. So I think the social media platform played a really big part because we targeted audiences all over Tanzania. Tanzania as a community in general came together over the social media platforms. And I think it played a really big role, yeah. The impact it had was really big.
Now, art is also a very powerful way to kind of ignite social change, right? And I think that throughout the past 6 months, with us kind of going through COVID, all of these glaring inequalities in our communities were made to be even more apparent. So what are some of the ways that the both of you feel that art can help us transform communities post-COVID-19? I'll start with Ravneesh.
So I think art is a good way to stimulate dialogue between people and the spaces that they inhabit. And this also increases social engagement and improves the community. I also think the creative industry is a tool for innovation, and this can also be implemented in other industries. For example, marketing in Zanzibar for tourism is a great way. I think it's also art can also play a big part in reimagining public spaces through art interventions, holding platforms for artists to transfer their knowledge. This can be murals, this can be art installations, which start a dialogue for the community.
I like that, using art to kind of recreate public spaces. And you, Sandile?
For me, I'm an artist by nature. And the one thing I've realized over time is that like art tends to be out of reach for a lot of people because it's expensive, and a lot of people tend to get intimidated by the space that art exists in. And that has essentially led me to resort to clothing as a canvas for art, because that essentially is art that moves. And it's like the person essentially serves as a gallery, and as they walk around, it has a high impact, because if I'm talking to you, I'll be looking at your t-shirt and I'll read the message and it will register in my mind. And that's why we, as unicorns, we embed like quotes of self-belief and self-affirmation within our clothes and our artworks to essentially kind of impact people's lives in that manner, because we realize that over time, when you walk around and you could be buying something at a tuck shop, and the person that is buying that thing from you, they read your t-shirt and it's like, believe in what you can't see. And that to them is a reminder. And a lot of the times our customers have came back to us and said that they've had people tell them that what's on their t-shirt, on their jacket is exactly what they needed at that moment in time. And I believe that art could have a high impact if it could be more accessible to more people, and if it could be more affordable, and if it could sort of like mobilize and move into spaces that art doesn't reach, and that could only be done with people moving and wearing their clothes.
There's a question here, two questions in fact. I'll start with this one. It's from Nahid, who asks, how do you see business evolving in a post-COVID-19 environment? And I'll start with you, Ravneesh.
I think artists have been more creative. We've been pushed to be more creative in this pandemic, and I think it's really, how do I put it? We've really been forced to think out of the box, get more creative. People have really turned to social media as well, get more creative and really rediscover art and rethink art. And I think post-COVID, we're going to see a lot of creativity and innovation coming out of this, definitely. Because people who didn't even know they were creative have actually started creating things, and they've rediscovered their passion for art. And I think it's going to be great.
And there's a question for you, Sandile. What's the item that you're wearing today? So you're already getting business from today's engagement.
So the item that I'm wearing today is a jacket from the two-piece tracksuit that was in the presentation. And essentially the jacket in it, it's a camouflage jacket, and inside the camouflage, if you look closely, you'll start to find unicorns. And it is also waterproof, which essentially is good for the season that we're in, especially for us in summer, we have a lot of rain. And it is such a dope conversational piece, because on Monday, I was actually at a shoot and I was styling the shoot, and essentially in that shoot, one of the clients that we were working with asked to borrow a jacket. And when they realized that there were unicorns inside the jacket, they literally went crazy and like went around showing people. And it's sort of like the small details like that essentially kind of sort of like help build a community, because it's not just clothing, it starts to become an artwork and a conversational piece for people to actually sort of like start a conversation with, and that essentially sparks a bigger conversation. And like when in every situation when a unicorn is involved, it tends to sort of like the conversation that follows tends to involve magic and imagination.
I really like how much you believe in your product, Sandile. You believe clothes can heal people. You believe clothes can start conversations. You you really, really believe in your product and it shows. But I think just to wrap up our conversation for today, if you could tell us in 2 sentences, right, as artists in your respective, work, what does resilient recovery look like and what does it mean to you post-COVID-19? I'm going to start with you, Ravneesh, and I'm going to ask you to first turn on your camera. Okay, you can go ahead, Sandile. I think maybe we've lost Ravneesh.
So I didn't quite catch that.
Oh, okay. I was asking just to kind of conclude the conversation, if you could, in 2 sentences, relate to us as an artist, what does resilient recovery post-COVID-19 look like to you?
Okay, so I think we're seeing more collaborations between local businesses now. So this has really targeted the local community, and I think we're going to come back stronger and bigger and closer than ever. And I think arts in Africa, in general, Tanzania, is going to play a huge part to come.
And for you, Sandile?
If I could sum it up in 2 sentences, I would say, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Thank you so much. But before we wrap up, there's a final question in the question box, and I'm going to pose this one to either Naomi or Antoine. How do you think people's relationship to the sensory aspects of art will change with this global push towards digitalization?
This is perhaps a question for the artists, but I think what we see and what we hope is that the digital space provides a window into other people's sort of creative spaces. And I think as Ravneesh and Sandile have mentioned, it's really creating a window to the artistic worlds in other locations. And once that is translated into sort of creative exchange, whether it's exchange of ideas, economic exchanges, I think that would add to the resilience of our recovery from this time.
Antoine, would you like to answer that for us before we wrap up?
I would say that I hope it goes as we wish, but my worries are because my work is about inclusion, how to include people into different processes.
Antoine, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm just going to ask you to please turn on your camera if you can.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep. I guess you can see me now. Yes. My worry is just that our relationship to real things will change. That we won't really, because that's happening already. We don't make the difference between the real world and the artificial world. And we think that children think that milk is coming from the shop, and they don't see the relationship with the cow. The same thing, I think, with more digitalization, people won't make the difference that there's an artist behind it. It's not just a computer producing the things. So that's the side I'm worried about.
That's a very, very interesting take, Antoine. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Just before we leave and I do my final goodbyes, I would like to remind our audience members that we have a few more of these conversations that are lined up as the Art4Dev community. So please do connect with us on social media. Please follow Youth Transforming Africa for all of that correspondence. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you to Marina, to Naomi, to Antoine, to our brilliant artists, Ravneesh Hans and Sandile Mhlongo, for giving us their time and really contributing to a rich conversation. Thank you for allowing me to host you and to moderate this conversation. But that's it from my side. Thank you so much for joining us. Good evening.
Thank you, Dimpho. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
And I would like to remind everybody the next event is on November 23rd and will be in French. And it will focus on adolescent girls empowerment and child bride. So if you're interested in receiving our updates, please write to the art program at worldbank.org. Thank you to the artists, to Naomi, to Antoine, and certainly to our wonderful moderator, to the team who allowed us to create this beautiful event.